Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for joining us today. We're super excited to go through here our HR fitness test. So welcome. If you have not joined us before, we're excited to have you here. If you are here again, welcome back. All right, so let's get started. Thank you for joining. Obviously, by registering for this, you are consenting to receiving follow-up emails. Nothing in this presentation is intended to be legal advice. We are not employment attorneys. We are the stop between Google and your attorney. So if you are looking for actionable next steps, make sure that you schedule a call after this. Feel free. We'd love to answer any questions that you have that are outside of what we cover here. Okay, Q&As. Please type all of your questions in the Q&A box. We'll be answering as many as we can towards the end. If we are unable to answer all of the questions, or if you have a question that is private or you feel more comfortable one-on-one, feel free to, again, schedule a call, reach out, and one of us would be very happy to chat with you. All right, so today's agenda is you're going to introduce CYB, our fitness test, which is awesome. So if you have not taken our fitness test yet, we are going to drop the link in the chat. You can take it really quickly. You can follow along and you can take that fitness test. That's what we are going to be covering today. It covers a range of different topics, and a few of those are some of the questions that we're going to be answering here momentarily. Okay. Who we are. Obviously, I'm the founder and CEO of CYB Human Resources. I am a small business risk mitigation expert. I've been in this business for a very long time. I specialize in small businesses. I'm from New Jersey originally. Florida, Oklahoma is where I started the company in 2015, and Colorado is where I currently am. Been in the HR field for over 15 years and in-house multi-site businesses. I was working at multiple different companies between 20 and 500 employees. It really ranged. So we really do have an in-depth experience here and a group of knowledge that's really great. We specialize in, like, small business consulting. We are non-equity people partners for our clients. So what we do is we provide that HR support at a high level without having to hire someone in-house. And we're specialized in building out that HR infrastructure and continuing scalability for growth, which is really, really important if you are planning on building your business.
All right, fabulous. And my name is Rachel Patch. I am the head HR generalist here at CYB Human Resources. I have been the head HR generalist for just about 3 years with CYB. I previously worked in-house HR for nonprofits before joining the CYB team. I am a HR compliance expert, and I specialize in building HR for small businesses who have a mindset towards overall growth. Just really excited to have you all on a call with us today.
Beautiful. Awesome. So CYB, we are a full service outsourced HR firm. The major gap when we started this business, when I kicked it off, was there was no proactive HR in place for small businesses. It was either we're Googling and hoping for the best, or, we're making decisions and then we're calling our attorney asking if they can get us out of something that we might have done wrong. So our goal really is to be proactive, be that piece that's helping you grow, being alongside you while you're making those decisions and helping you remain in compliance. I am personally invested in this small business area. I love small businesses. I think it's really important these resources are provided to you and those companies that are trying to grow and trying to do it right. We are industry agnostic. We work across the board, different industries, different headcounts. If you have employees, you need some type of HR in place. Providing guidance and scaling that business. And this is really important. So upfront, if you are starting out right now, even if you have a business and you already have employees in place, hire the experts to do it right the first time. So it's quicker and easier to do it right the first time than it is when we partner with a client to go in and try to undo things that have been done incorrectly for years. We do that on a regular basis. But again, if you are starting out right now, getting basics in place is really important, and you can continue to build on that. A concierge HR hotline, that's something that's super basic. It's a great starting point for a small business. At a minimum, this is something that you should have in place. The best way to manage any EOC charge is to prevent it proactively. So trying to put it out after is not as easy as it sounds, for sure. In order for a business to defend against a lawsuit, there are 2 major points that the business needs to be able to prove. So number 1 is that they provided proactive prevention, training, policies, you updated your handbook, your managers are very aware on how to handle harassment claims, bullying, what the first step is. The first step is not to send that person back into the situation they just complained about. So that's a good note. And the second part here is for options for employees to utilize and that they have acknowledged. So an HR resource, for example, an HR hotline. We have an HR hotline. There are a couple different options out there, but something in place that the employee is not required to go to the business owner directly and let them know that they're feeling uncomfortable. So it provides a buffer really for that C team. HR in a box, again, great starting point here for a small business. These are the tools that you put in place up front. These are the foundational pieces. You need to have these in place no matter how big you are, how small you are, it doesn't matter. Handbook, which is the employee facing portion. So the handbook is what the employees are reviewing, the employees are signing, you're presenting this to them, they can ask questions, but make sure it's up to date. It's really important. The laws change regularly. So making sure your employee handbook has been updated here for 2024. And again, compliance updates come out regularly. So if you're in multiple states, it's super important to have a compliance idea in place. So you're getting those updates and you're acting on them. You're not passing them around the office, which again is something that happens pretty regularly. SOPs, so this is the internal side of the HR. So these are the standard operating procedures and internal processes. So anything you're doing more than once, hiring, for example, corrective actions and terminations, all of those things need to have an SOP that's documented and make sure that your management is definitely trained on all of those processes. The third one, again, is a HR compliance report, HR compliance review. So doing a full company-wide HR compliance review for all of the locations that you have. If you have one location, that's great. If you have remote employees, there's different HR compliance requirements for those employees, most likely. So looking into that is going to be really important for you. Okay, so the fitness test. Again, some of you have taken it. That's awesome. We've seen them. They look great. So we're going to go through some of these questions. Okay, so up front, discipline and termination. This is going to be our first section. So do you understand the risks that are associated with termination? Obviously, managing terminations are a challenge. So this is an example of the process here that we're going through. So you're fired, your employment is hereby terminated, you don't have a job anymore, you're promoted to customer. So having this process in place and having this documented is really, really important. We have had experiences, I've worked with clients in the past, and for example, one client who was a medical company and they had a medical assistant in place and the medical assistant couldn't take blood pressure, which common sense, there's no common sense in HR. Common sense would tell you that the medical assistant would need to be able to do that. And because they did not have a job description that was accurately updated, the person did not have an updated offer letter, the company ended up having to pay unemployment to this employee because they said, well, she didn't know that that was part of her job, even though we all think and know that obviously taking blood pressure would be part of a medical assistant's job. So keeping that in mind, that's real life stuff that happens. So the first question here that we have, and we have some polling questions. So do you understand the risks associated with termination? So I'd love to see your answers here. Some of you have already answered on the fitness test, so you should really know this. You're studied up, but please let me know what you guys are thinking. Let me give it a few minutes. Awesome. Good. These look good. All right, cool. I'm gonna actually end that right here. Wonderful. So we're going to go into the next steps here. We'll review the answers. So there are answers here. The answer is that yes, every termination comes with risk. You need to minimize those risks and consistently apply policies throughout regularly, the same way every single time. The biggest question we get asked is, hey, we're an at-will employer. You know, we fire and hire whoever we want. Isn't that okay? Technically, you know, at-will employment, the day they become an employee, they are an employee. So when you are planning on firing that employee or you're terminating a team or whatever it is that you are doing, you need documentation in place. That is why the hiring process is so very important. You do not want to hire an employee and then have to fire them a few weeks later because they're not the right fit. So hiring slowly, but firing quick, but not too quick, meaning you have the documentation in place to show that this is a proper termination. Okay. Risks associated with termination, EEOC charges. The way this works is you think you've done the right thing and you terminate an employee and then a few days later you get an EEOC charge saying that the employer feels like you terminated them because they made a complaint, they're claiming harassment, or they were harassed, things like that, that just show up on your desk that are not fun to deal with following a termination. Retaliation, obviously, so firing an employee for making a complaint of any kind is illegal, obviously, but something that is really important to be aware of. So once an employee makes a complaint, termination is going to be an issue. That is why moving a problem around a company is a problem. Once you realize an employee is not a good fit, starting that process of terminating that team member is the steps that you want to take. You do not want to prolong that process, because if within that process the employee makes a complaint of some sort, at that point, terminating them could be seen as retaliation. So keeping that in mind when you are going through a termination process or managing a difficult employee. Legal risks, expensive. We all want to avoid this. They are timely, they are consuming of every area of your life. So avoiding any sort of lawsuit is super important here. Reputation, you do not want to be known as a company that hires and fires, at whim and doesn't really care. It's really important nowadays, specifically, it's really hard to retain good employees. So having a good reputation, making sure that your online reviews are good, making sure that you're, Glassdoor, there's places where employees can go and say things. And it's really important that what they're saying is positive. You built this company and you're managing this company and you want it to be a good experience. Obviously, unemployment is not fun. Unemployment is really not fun if you end up having to pay somebody who, for example, stole from your company and you don't have documentation or any proof to show that that happened. So that is going to really irritate you. So making sure that you have your ducks in a row when you are terminating somebody. There are ways to minimize risk of an unwelcome outcome when terminating an employee. Clear, well-documented documentation. I say that all the time, but it's really important. Documentation is the number one thing. And then again, making sure that nothing in that documentation could be seen as discriminatory. So we're not saying words that are illegal or describing situations improperly. Being proactive. So there's an issue, we got to deal with it. Putting our head in the ground and, not dealing with the issue up front is a potential problem. So it's not comfortable. It's never easy, but being proactive is really important. Upfront costs versus legal costs. So for example, working with an HR team like us is something that it's similar to insurance. You need to have these things in place, not necessarily for your current employees, because they all may be amazing. Think more about the employees that you hire. It takes one bad hire to spin your head around in a circle and your company potentially imploding. So upfront costs are minimal compared to the legal costs that could come if you are not properly following the law. Documentation, again, maintaining your standards on how you handle everything, maintaining those processes throughout the company. All managers should be trained on each of these. And considering, the impact on company culture and morale when you are terminating an employee. So is this somebody that is going to make a big difference in the company? Does everybody love this person? Considering the other employees when you're going through this process and how you're going to manage that when something comes up, because inevitably someone's going to ask what happened and you want to be prepared. There are a couple options there on how you can do that, but consider your company culture when you're terminating employees. Okay, so do your managers formally document performance issues? Polling question. Again, this is another one that's pulled from the HR fitness test. I'd love to hear your feedback. Beautiful. Documentation is not easy, and nobody wants to do the paperwork, and everyone thinks it's boring until an EEOC charge comes and a manager is individually named in a lawsuit, which is something that many managers don't know can happen. So getting that documentation proper, making sure everyone's doing it well is really important. Awesome. Great answers. Cool. Beautiful. All right. So obviously here, the answer is that managers do an excellent job. So respect documenting performance issues, administering disciplinary actions. So things must be done pretty quickly. So someone does something wrong today, you're not going to wait a month to do that. You want to make sure that they can correct the action, that they have the opportunity to do so. So letting them know, in the next few days, this is not properly done. Writing a corrective action, sending a follow-up email, anything on the employer side that you are able to document is going to be really important. So even a coaching conversation, following that up with an email and saying, hey, this is just a follow-up to remind you, X, Y, and Z, don't do that again. That's it. That's going to come in really handy with any sort of unemployment issues that come up or any sort of EEOC charges that you might face in the future. Beautiful. Okay, performance documentation. the good. So performance reviews, awesome. Do them. If you're doing them right, they're great. There's different options for performance reviews. You can really link them to your payroll system, potentially. Building out your performance reviews is something that's really important. Something that's also really important is linking those performance reviews to bonuses, salaries, making sure that it's across the board equal for everybody, because those are things that, the government's going to look at based on who's getting raises and, woman, man, all different types of people, making sure that everyone's getting raises properly and that there's no sort of discriminatory issues that could be seen in that area. Positive feedback. Give positive feedback as often as you can. I am somebody who lets everybody know all the time how good they're doing. If they're doing a good job, I don't lie about it. But if someone's doing a good job, let them know. It's really nice. They want to hear that. And people want to know that they are hitting their metrics and in the right area. The bad, performance improvement plans. So performance improvement plans versus corrective actions. So corrective actions are utilized when you are in the process of an employee's not doing a good job over and over again. A performance improvement plan would be something that you don't necessarily utilize that when you're planning on firing this employee anyway. So if the employee is on the way out the door, the corrective actions are fine. If this is someone that you really do feel could be a good employee, they're just having issues in certain areas, we would tend to give them more of a performance improvement plan and work with them, provide coaching, training, whatever it is that they need. The ugly. So internal memos. So documenting these things. We recommend having a manager notebook that you're utilizing regularly. If you're not able to be writing corrective actions all the time, document it somewhere, because those documents are something that we can utilize in the future to look back on and review situations that's occurred, and documenting investigations. So unbiased investigations are super important. Again, that's something that we do for our clients, but having an unbiased view on an investigation is really important. So keep that in mind when an issue occurs, making it equal across the board. We're not pointing our fingers at everybody. Again, it's need to know. That's another thing at a small business. It's not easy to do, but keeping in mind that investigations are need to know. Not everybody has to know everything that's going on at the business. And the goal would be to try to maintain that and keep it as close to the vest as possible, because we don't want things spiraling out of control. All right, Rachel, I'm going to pass it on to you for this.
Fabulous. All right, let's get into leave and accommodation laws. So what we're going to be looking at here is, does your company have a policy for accommodating employees under the ADA? Awesome. So I love this because I think it's a perfect example of a case where an accommodation is needed and we are just offering the wrong kind of accommodation. So accommodations come in all different forms. They are going to be different for each and every person who requests one. Accommodations are going to be based on the specific disability that someone has and what that looks like in order to overcome that need to meet their basic job requirements. So all the time we are asking in ADA, what is the right way to accommodate employees who need it? You may have someone who requests, 5 minutes here and there for a break, and you have other employees who come in and request every Friday off. So making sure that you're being smart about that. And then we've got our HR fitness test question here. So that's going to go ahead and get started. Put your answers in the poll.
Does your company have a policy for accommodating employees under the ADA? Interactive process. Well done. Good job. That's a hint, obviously. I messed up. Awesome. Yeah, most of you are on the right page. So utilizing an interactive process is the way to go. It is a process. So it's not just you deciding whether or not this accommodation is okay. There's steps that you need to take to make sure that the accommodation is something that you can cover, that it doesn't require, it doesn't stop the business from functioning by being able to offer this. So here are those answers. And again, using the interactive process obviously is the correct one.
Yeah.
Okay, onward.
Awesome. Okay, so the Americans with Disability Act, what is the purpose? So this law is in place to allow folks with disabilities to engage in the work process and to be treated with equity and dignity in the workplace. The protected population, again, this is folks who have a disability. There are constant changes to who exactly qualifies and has a disability, what physical disabilities, mental disabilities, and then, of course, with big changes last year with the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, does pregnancy count as a disability as well? So making sure you're always up to date on exactly what population is going to be protected. And then these specific employment protections that are offered to folks with disabilities. So that includes anything that is a necessary job function, if it can be accommodated, if there are changes that can be made to the process of how to complete their role, so that someone with a disability can come in and complete their work just like everyone else. That is an essential part of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And just as important is, when is it not necessary to provide an accommodation? As the employer, it can be difficult to go through not only the interactive process on an accommodation, but to get to the end of it and decide you do have to provide that accommodation. It can be difficult to put that in place. And so if it's going to be an undue hardship on your organization, once you've gone through the whole process, then those are not going to be necessary accommodations. So I love this because it is a little outline of what the interactive process can look like at an organization. So it is the employee's responsibility to come forward first, to initiate. They come forward with that request for accommodation. Then consideration by the employer, by you, with any necessary investigation that's needed to determine whether that is going to be an appropriate accommodation. Then a decision is going to have to be made based on that investigation as to whether we can go forward with that accommodation. Reconsideration can happen here. If the employee wants to come forward with that, next up, if they want to appeal, but having a third party look into your process for looking at that accommodation request to make sure that it is either a hardship or not a hardship for your organization. And then we start right back at the top if an employee needs to put in a different request. Awesome. And then we're going to go ahead and jump really quickly to related topic, HR compliance here. So big topic, does your organization have an employee handbook? That'll be the central topic as we go through. Awesome. So employment law can sometimes feel like this game of Uno, where you've got so many cards you don't even know where to start. You've got 101 different laws to look at, not sure which one to start with. One I like to highlight here is anti-harassment requirements. So that is something that across the board, we can all agree we don't want that happening in any organization. So what are the steps and pieces that are required by law? And then what are the best practices to support those laws to make sure that your managers are not getting themselves in a snafu, making sure that you're protected, making sure the organization is protected, and making sure that everyone is aware of what their responsibilities are under the law. All right, so we'll go ahead and open up another question for my HR fitness test. Do you feel good about your I-9s being completed and stored in accordance with the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services standards?
This is awesome. We have a lot of rock stars here that know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I love. I-9s are definitely an area that is, they're easy to prevent a problem from happening if you know what you're doing. For example, it is a two-part process. We've worked with a lot of people before that have not recognized that the I-9 is a two-part process. You cannot just give the form to the employee and that's it. It requires you as an employer to review those documents and make sure that verifying it internally, making sure that the documents are proper. So that's an example of just a mistake that can be prevented if you know what you're doing, but it comes with really hefty fines if you do not. So if they show up at your door and go to look at your I-9s and they are not properly done, the fines are outrageous for the mistake. So perfect. Great. I love that. Wonderful news. So obviously being a here. So checking employment verification documents, using the newest form, they update these forms regularly as well as many different forms that are available. So using the most updated form is important. And again, this is a big one, making sure that your I-9s are filed separately from your personnel files. So they cannot all be in one file. So I recommend having those separately. They must be locked separately if you have the paper documents in your office. So having them in two separate locked drawers is fine, but they cannot be in the employee manual or in the employee personnel file. Go ahead, Rachel.
Awesome. Okay. I-9s, you gotta love them. part of that employment eligibility verification process. So what is our purpose here with I-9s? The ultimate purpose is to verify the identity and the employment eligibility of the employees coming into your company. It's a legal process, again, required by law. So it can be it's luckily a pretty quick and easy process, fairly painless for what it's trying to do. And then, of course, there are options for remote-only companies that have come out as of 2023. So super important just for that legal compliance piece, also to make sure that you're complying with, everyone who works for your company needs to be eligible to work in the country where they are trying to work from. So making sure that there's that verification across the board. It's an essential component of your hiring process, needs to be completed at least 3 days or less by the time you have someone join your team. And then we'll go ahead and jump here to the next HR fitness question, which is, does your organization have a policy against harassment in the workplace?
This is a big one. This is one that affects every company, honestly. Being able to show that you have preventative measures in place when it comes to harassment, bullying, violence, things like that is going to save you a lot. It's really important to have that updated for sure. So love this. I'm seeing a lot of providing the trainings to the employees on the topic. That's fantastic. Making sure that you do that. There's different trainings, obviously, for managers and employees. Managers have a higher level of responsibility. They are required to report any sort of harassment complaints that they receive. So the training for the managers should be slightly different, reminding them of that importance. So the employees in general, letting them know that if there's something going on, to report it as soon as possible. Again, including in that harassment training, making sure that they are aware that retaliation is not something that's going to happen at your organization. So if they make a complaint and it's a valid complaint, you are going to follow through on it. You want to make sure that your company is safe, of course. So beautiful. Cool.
Awesome.
All right. Wonderful. All righty. Next.
Fabulous. Okay, so our anti-harassment policy and our training here. Keeping in mind that follow-through piece. So ultimately, our purpose with everything, anti-harassment policy, training, conversations with employees, always our goal is to prevent harassment from happening, to address it quickly when it happens, and to eliminate any form of harassment. That is our ultimate goal with all of these different pieces. And then on those pieces, we also can protect the company while also protecting employees. So that training piece, you want to make sure that employees have completed the training. You want to record that they've completed that training. So a acknowledgement page that says they've received it, a sign off, a sign-in sheet before they come into the training, whatever that looks like. That acknowledgement of responsibility to uphold that anti-harassment policy. We want employees to have buy-in here. It is something that they need to be embodying in all that they do while they're working at the company. And it also promotes this feeling of respect amongst employees. We are going to respect folks' different cultures, different areas, different backgrounds that folks come from. Everyone at the company is going to be treated with dignity, going to be treated with fairness. And if there is an employee who is not upholding that standard and is not promoting that respect, then the company is going to take that very seriously. And then preventing workplace conflicts. If we put it up front, retaliation is not going to be something that employees have to worry about. They can come forward with any harassment complaints and they will be taken seriously. People come forward sooner, and that means we can address it sooner and we can decrease those workplace conflicts.
For sure. And something to consider here and just keep in mind is harassment is not based on if I tried to harass somebody and make them feel uncomfortable. Harassment is completely based on how somebody feels. So if, for example, Rachel and I are having a conversation that someone feels is inappropriate, that person is able to say that they're feeling uncomfortable in the situation. That's a hostile work environment. So remembering, like Rachel said, that obviously there's different cultures and different people, and it's really important to just consider who's around. Is this something that is this a joke that I would tell, one of my parents, or is this something that probably belongs outside of work? So I highly, sex, religion, and politics, all three of those are things that I would say, let's not discuss those within the workplace. At some point, someone's going to get fired up. So that's something, those three targeted areas are, as a manager, shut it down. I would highly recommend shut it down and get that out of the office, because eventually they may laugh and think it's funny up front, but you never know how someone's really feeling. All righty, Miss Rachel.
All right, let's go into our last section here on wage and hour information. So something to keep in mind during this section, do you know how quickly employees who have quit or been terminated, how quickly do they have to receive that final paycheck? All right, so if anyone has ever done payroll or managed timesheets for employees, you will probably be able to relate to this one. It can be difficult to get employees into the habit of logging their time on their timesheets, and then you're left scrambling to try and find what that time looks like. All right, next question here. Are you properly tracking and paying all time worked, including overtime, by your non-exempt employees?
And are you 100% confident that your non-exempt employees and exempt employees are properly classified? Keep that in mind. That's another one. So there's lots of layers to all of these questions, but the basics are really important. Beautiful. There's a lot of people here and feeling good about it, which I love. There's lots of things coming around. There's people talking about 4-day work weeks. There's different requirements in different states. So again, this is really important to make sure that you are up to date with what's happening in your state. And that what overtime means, you know, in Colorado is different potentially than what overtime means in California. So making sure that you have that roped in and you're very comfortable with how you're handling and paying your employees. Perfect. Okay.
Fabulous. Okay, so time tracking is going to be hugely important to keep your business up and running. As much as possible, we want to set the standards with employees when they first start about what time tracking looks like, what time has to be tracked, and we want to have that full overview of how folks are using their time as much as possible. So that tracking of time is going to improve your overall productivity. Humans in general have a rough time with trying to guess how much time a task is taking. So by tracking your time, you're going to have more information about how long does that task actually take. Your employees are going to have more information about that, and your productivity is going to go up as a result. It's also, of course, going to increase your billing accuracy for clients, if that is how your business runs, because you're going to have a better idea of what time actually needs to be billed. And then cost control. So how long is it taking to do an item? Are there some items that are just taking too long to be cost effective for the company? And if so, are there changes to be made? Can we update job descriptions, processes? It lets you really get into the nitty gritty of the operations of the organization.
And yes, absolutely. And something I'm going to add there is when we have clients come in and tell us that, you know, Sally's working 50 hours a week and we have no idea what Sally's doing, and her job description is a mess. We don't know what's going on there. The best way, you know, to really figure out what's going on is to be, you can offer those employees an option or an opportunity to track their week. And that really it provides you as the business owner and the management team, the ability to see what is actually being done throughout the week. And it's important because then you're reading this time tracking, and what she's actually doing may have nothing to do with her job description. Again, now that's forcing you to look at the job description and see if this person is actually in the right position. So there's different pieces as to why time tracking is important. And that's something that keep in mind. So if you have somebody who you're not really sure what they're doing, and they are clocking 50 hours a week, and you really need to know what's going on, obviously. So providing them with sheets, we have those documents as well. You can reach out to us. We have forms that we utilize for that, and we'd be happy to provide that for you to show you how to do it.
Awesome. So our last question here, are you confident that all of your exempt employees are properly classified?
That last sentence, good. So this is something that's really important. The government wants to make sure that misclassification is not happening. If it was up to the government, everyone would be hourly, because that means that everyone is getting paid for every hour that they're working. And most, you know, that's why there's processes in place. There's a duties test is what it's called. And it's processed by the FLSA. And what that means is that in order for somebody to be classified as a salaried employee, there are requirements by the government that they must be doing, that allows them to be a salaried employee. So just putting, you know, a admin assistant or a secretary on salary because you think they should be is something that could be a real big red flag for anyone that's looking at the company overall. So awesome. There's some great, doing a great job, guys.
Yeah, all across the board here. Yeah.
Cool. Beautiful. All right, the DOL's duties salaries test. Perfect. So you should be running all job descriptions when you're doing a job description project. When we do a job description project with our clients, we run every single job description through the duties test to make sure that these employees are properly classified. It is expensive to misclassify an employee. You do not want to do that. So that's something that's really important. You can check that out. You can find it on the DOL, and obviously schedule a call with us if you have questions on how to do that. I'd be happy to show you where it's located and walk you through what that process looks like.
Awesome. So employee classification overall, this is just the process of categorizing employees based on their job responsibilities and the level of control that you as the employer have over their work. So there are a lot of different categories that folks can fall into. Folks will often fall into multiple categories at once: full-time, part-time, a temp employee, a contractor, an intern. There are lots of different options about where people can fall in terms of classification. There are legal implications, of course, if you are misclassifying folks. For any of these different buckets, if folks are in the wrong bucket, there are legal implications, and that means fines. And so those will vary based on what the improper classification looks like. So exempt versus non-exempt is, I think, the biggest bucket to decide, where do folks fall exempt versus non-exempt. That's going to have implications on reporting responsibilities. It's going to have implications on, do they get overtime or not? How many hours are they working per week? So this is a really important one. You want to be sure you're following the FLSA standards. Benefits is another piece. Depending on which classification folks fall into, their benefits may be different. So everything from vacation and sick leave to health can be different based on which classifications people fall under. And then, of course, the all-important taxes, the most fun section. So your classification, your taxes are going to be different based on the category that folks fall into. So another monetary implication of making sure you're classifying folks correctly.
And I am actually going to pick up there really quick to the benefits there. So a little hint that if you are offering benefits to your team, or you're planning on offering benefits to your team, there is a way to set up benefits for different classes of employees. So if you are providing benefits to your team and you want to provide an executive level benefit versus a employee level benefit, that's something you can do. And there's different regulations for each state, and it's really important to pay attention to that HR compliance in those areas. So keep that in mind if you're planning to build out benefits for your company. Again, really important, setting your company apart from everybody else who's doing what you're doing for retention, for hiring, all of that fun stuff. So just a little idea, suggestion right there. Awesome. Any questions? I mean, this is the HR fitness test has a ton of different questions here, and I'd love to answer any that you guys have. Please. It's a pretty quiet group. I've seen a couple come through that were direct that we need to put into the Q&A. But please, any questions on any of those things? Benefits, hiring, non-exempt versus exempt, duties test, how you do it. We'd be happy to answer those questions. And again, a lot of times when we do these webinars, there are questions that some people want to ask individually one-on-one, which is totally fine. So that's why we're going to provide here momentarily a Q&R code that you're going to be able to scan. You can download a freebie here. We have an awesome, I think it's a termination package. Is that right? I'm going to move forward here into this next slide. Awesome. So what we are providing here, so we have the complimentary HR advising session. So this is wonderful. I'd love to answer. Here we go. Awesome. So
yeah, we've got a couple.
Go ahead, for sure. Are there any here that you want to kick off with?
Yeah, so we've got one question here. How long after an employee is no longer working for the company are we required to keep documentation of their I-9? So the answer there is going to actually depend on how long the employee was with the company before they ended up leaving. Now, if you're storing electronically, maybe a good idea to keep them, but you need to make sure that you have generally 3 years is the number. Need to have that I-9 on file for 3 years generally. It's going to be specific depending on your situation. Okay. I've got another one here. How long after someone is terminated are employers given to give their final checks? That is going to depend on how they were terminated, which state they were terminated in. Some states, it's immediate, where you have to provide their final check on the spot as they're being terminated. For some states, you have some time before you're required to provide that check if they have company property. For other states, it is whenever the next regular payday would have been. So it's going to differ across the board. So if you are planning on terminating someone, you're going to need to do a state-specific review to make sure you're following all the state guidelines. Okay. And then I'm seeing a last one here. Does the government demand a minimum percent to hire staff with disabilities? That one, I apologize. I'm not sure what we're asking here. So
Yeah.
if you want to send a direct message to me on what that question meant, I'd be happy to answer it.
Yes. Awesome. Where can we get information on the I-9 documentation process? Actually what I can do is I think I will have somebody here, maybe Rachel, if you want to pull up the Form I-9 on DOL, we could drop that in the chat for everybody. So the Form I-9, the most updated Form I-9 is going to be located on the DOL's website, which Rachel will pop here in the chat for you. And the directions are on the I-9. However, again, if you do not have somebody with an HR background or HR experience, they can be really convoluted and crazy. So for example, no crossouts are allowed. That's a penalty. Using the wrong color ink is not appropriate. So there's really little picky things that the government thinks is not okay. Once you review that, the process is, like Rachel mentioned previously, the I-9 must be completed within the first 3 days of that employee's new first day. So getting it done a week before they start is totally fine. I would get it done as soon as possible. But typically on the first day is usually where you would complete it, unless you have them come in and complete new hire paperwork beforehand. So that's fine. Do it a week before. That's totally okay. Just do not wait to do that until, weeks later. Obviously, you have an employee who has no I-9 completed, and that's a potential major issue. Awesome.
Okay, we have another one. Do you need to keep the I-9 for an active employee the same 3 years? So while the employee is active, you need to keep that I-9 on file. It is not until they have left the company that then you go through the process of determining how much longer you can keep it on file.
And there is a retention calculation here, and Rachel's correct with approximately 3 years is a good area of where you're looking at for the I-9 retention. But there is a calculation based on when the employee quit, or if the employee was let go, or when the employee started plus 3 years. So it's really going to be different based on the employee and the status of that employee, how long they've been there, and when they were terminated. So it's going to differ for each individual. Perfect. Great questions. Any other questions? And Rachel has popped that in the chat. So for the I-9, that's the most updated I-9 right there. And you find the process of the I-9. And I was going to look for that for you really quick and see if I could find that. Here, this is a great, here you go. This link right here. That is going to send you to the page that really explains everything about the I-9, why it's important that we have it in place. Right now, there are some states, some areas require e-verification. For example, some industries require e-verify, which is the online process of I-9s. At some point in the future, everyone is going to be required to be doing the e-verify. So that is not necessarily required for all states across the board. But at some point, I see no question from us. At some point, you will probably be needing to do e-verify anyway. So you can familiarize yourself with that process now. If you're comfortable with that, the e-verify process is really simple. So it may be something that you decide to just transition into anyway.
Okay. Question that just came in. Is there a list of must-haves in a company handbook? I think you're seeing a theme here. The answer is yes, but also no. It depends on where you are. So which states are you in? Which states is the company operating in? Which states do you have employees in? Do you have any employees who are outside of the US? That's going to change what your handbook looks like. There are best practice policies where everyone's got to have them. They're federal requirements. And then there are going to be policies on top of that, which are going to be required by state. And then there are ones that are not necessarily required by law, but best practice policies. So there's definitely a pyramid of which policies are going to need to go in your company handbook. So actually, if you're curious about what policies are going to be best for your company handbook, shoot us an email afterwards, because I would love to pop on a call with you and talk about your situation specifically.
Yeah. And so the best way, I mean, we have clients that do it multiple different ways, but if you have employees in multiple different states, something you could do is have a standardized basic handbook based on the corporate headquarters. And what many people do is they have addendums. So they'll have a basic handbook based on, whatever state their headquarters is located in, and an addendum for each state there's an employee. Obviously that can get kind of cumbersome when you have employees in 15, 20 different states. Another option is going with essentially kind of the lowest common denominator, or the greatest, I'm missing the word. But if there's different leave laws, and if you have employees in multiple different states, some of the leave laws, for example, some places may require a sick leave specifically. Some places may not require a sick leave specifically. So what they will do is they will just put the sick leave in place and provide that sick leave to every employee, instead of having to have multiple different addendums at the end. So that's definitely something you could do and consider. But there's ways to go around that and set it up properly for your company. And I think whoever that was, feel free, again, Rachel will hop on a call with you and can walk you through your individual setup and see if there's areas, what we would recommend for you to put into place in your handbook. It's going to be different industry as well. So industry specific stuff, headcount, all that fun stuff. Awesome. Any other questions? Those were great questions. Thank you. It was a pleasure having you. We're excited you were here. Wonderful. So we obviously have continued upcoming webinars as a part of our series. We'd love to continue to see you here. Again, please utilize this code here. Please scan this code. And then I would like to, do we have a form? Do we have a link for the, form? Let's drop in the chat. Potentially. So if you're unable to scan that, I'm going to follow up with you guys, shoot you over an email, so you'll be able to download this document as well as schedule a call with us. The calendar on the upcoming webinars. Yes. So upcoming webinars are listed. If you go onto, if you're on LinkedIn, I highly suggest recommending that you follow the LinkedIn newsletter. So our LinkedIn newsletter, every time we have an upcoming webinar, we post that, we blast it out there for everyone to see. So check those out. Rachel, do you have a date for the next one that we're having?
Great question. Let me grab it.
Perfect. And if not, what we can do is we will add that in the follow-up email here for sure. I'm going to add in the chat here the LinkedIn. So if you subscribe to that LinkedIn newsletter, which we put out pretty regularly, you will have updated webinar dates. Every time we put a webinar out, we let you know, because we love having you guys here. We have a lot of fun when we do these. And additionally, I mean, we'd love to hear your feedback. We will provide also a survey link. So any feedback that you have on this webinar, or any upcoming questions, things that you're dealing with at your company that you'd like for us to feature in future webinars, we're building these based off of your feedback. So everything that you guys are sending to us and questions and things like that are what we want to deliver. So if you have any upcoming questions, Rachel just posted the next webinar, which is on the 23rd of April. And it'll be at 9:30 a.m. Mountain Time. So we hope that you guys attend. And again, I will send all this out into a follow-up email for you after. Any final questions before we hop off? It's been wonderful. This has been great having y'all here.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Hopefully we'll get a chance to chat.
Absolutely. Have a good rest of your day.